Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views covering the topics we hope are relevant to you. Well, today we report on how Sikh migrants are having their turbans forcibly removed in the US. An update on Amritpal Singh's position and the shocking news, if true, that the Indian government removes its ban on employee memberships of the RSS. And what does Kamala Harris mean for US-India relationships? Well, we'll find out. And joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to all of our amazing viewers. You're looking great out there.
And of course, James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. Of course, as always, we'll take a look at some of your great comments which have been filling up below the videos as always, so thank you as always for those. So let's kick off with James. James, what are you starting us off with today?
Well, I thought we would take a quick peek at the follow-up to a story that came out of the United States in Seattle, to be exact. Now, there was video shared from the Seattle Police Department of an officer who was joking about the value of a life. And in this particular case was an Indian woman who was finishing her degree at the university there. She was struck by a police cruiser doing over 117 kilometers an hour, heading to a level 1 call. However, the police, in responding with light sirens and to that level, are still responsible to ensure that they have care and control of the vehicle, that they are allowing themselves a response time, and I mean by that a personal response to be able to brake or avoid any dangerous situations. This young lady, I don't know if she was just crossing the street, maybe she had headphones in, I don't know how she didn't hear or see the police car coming, but again, if you imagine at 117 kilometers an hour, that's a pretty quick moving vehicle, so it isn't surprising that she wasn't able to maneuver out of the way. After she was struck down and died, one of the other police officers who was there was caught on his personal camera and laughing about it, saying that the city will have to cut a check for $11,000 and saying that she had limited value. Not only devaluing a human life, but that of a foreign student who was just, working on a graduate degree and just moving towards a, potentially very positive and very bright future, working hard, doing what she had to do to get to her goals. And her life was struck down. And here this police officer was just nonchalant about it and making jokes and just completely vile in the comments that he made. He has now been dismissed from the Seattle Police Department. Now, this happened several years ago, and it's been battling ever since. And now that they have a newer acting police chief, now she has taken the steps to dismiss him from his position. That does not mean that he will forever be relieved of being a police officer in Seattle, because now the union and his lawyers will challenge that and appeal it to see if he can get his job back. With that said, of course, he can always transfer to another police department who's willing to overlook the incident that played out there and try to keep him in a low-profile position so that it doesn't bring too much controversy if he was rehired by another police department somewhere else in the U.S. With that said, the Seattle Police Department, for a bit of backstory, has been under federal review and federal oversight due to their human rights issues in the past. And we're talking over 10 years that they've been under oversight. So this, again, just brings forward the importance of proper training, proper sensitivity, proper common sense, and it unfortunately has provided a very negative light and a very negative view of the Seattle Police Department and the officers. Now, there are bad officers in every department, no matter where you go around the world, and it is incidents like this that give all officers a bad name and give them all that tarnished badge. And that really isn't fair, because most of the officers are working their butt off to protect communities. They are in it for the right reasons, and they're doing everything they can to fight crime, to get the criminals locked up. The courts spin them back out as quick as they can get locked up. But the police are just going ahead and fighting an uphill battle. And this does not help. This may delay the further lessening of restrictions and oversight by the federal government. They have had some of the oversight regulations and systems removed with the changes they've made and the over $200 million they've spent over the last 10 plus years. But again, this may delay the pulling back even further of that oversight. So with that, I'm going to just say that, there was backlash from the government of India as well as community groups in that he valued a life at $11,000, whether or not he was speaking in terms of how the legal department's going to look at it or whatnot. It's still a vile comment no matter how he tries to explain it and pass it away. So with that, we hope that he won't be back on the force. We hope that they can weed out more of these bad actors in the police departments across America and around the world. We have bad actors in the police departments here in Canada. But to just devalue a young lady who is, over in America studying, working hard, and doing nothing wrong is just disgusting.
Yeah, interesting, and it's a terribly sad story. That young girl lost her life at such a young age. To me, there are two elements to this story. Firstly is the incident to start with, and the question is, was it preventable? That's a very grey area, and only experts can say if that was a preventable incident or not. Clearly, the police officer was responding to an incident. They have to drive at these speeds. They have to take all due care as they drive at these speeds. But unfortunately, it's likely with the number of police cars tearing backwards and forwards, there are going to be incidents. It's just the law of probability. So a very unfortunate situation. But the second part here, this is where the real story is in terms of what we're talking about. And the question is, how was this treated subsequent to the incident? And clearly, this police officer has shot his mouth off. He said something terrible. But the key here is, did he devalue this life because she was Indian, or he just devalued whoever it was? It was just a member of the public. I see no clear evidence that it was because this young girl was Indian, which is fortunate because then you're into a whole different story there. It becomes a story of racism. And I'm very, I think, relieved to some degree to see that there does not seem to be any element that this comment was targeted because she was an Indian national. And I think it's very easy to jump on that, but at the moment there is no evidence to point to that. But that does not dismiss the fact, the callousness with which this comment was made. But I would say in defence of this police officer that they have to deal on a day-to-day basis with stuff that ordinary members of the public don't have to deal with. They see things that would just horrify ordinary members of the public, and they become conditioned to this. They have no choice. To do their job well, they have to become conditioned to horrible situations. They see dead bodies on a regular basis. That is just part and parcel of their job. And somebody has to do it. And those people who do it have to become conditioned. And as part of that conditioning, they lose that sensitive edge that most normal people have. They have to, otherwise they will not be able to do their job properly. So they become hardened and they become callous. It becomes dark humour. And that, unfortunately, is what this was. It was dark humour. But that does not justify or validate a comment like this, but it explains it. So, yeah, I think in this situation, clearly there has to be some sort of disciplinary action taken against this officer. We've had similar incidents in the UK with police officers who, and this goes beyond this, where we've had terrible crimes committed, murders, where some police officers have shared photographs of crime scenes on WhatsApp across social media in their little groups. They have been rightly, severely disciplined and dismissed from the forces for doing this, and in some cases criminal charges, which absolutely are justified. In this situation was a callous comment. It was a cast-off callous comment. Yeah, he will be disciplined and he should be disciplined. Should he lose his job? That's open for debate. In my opinion, that's quite a long stretch to ruin his career for a castaway callous comment. I don't know. I'm sure people will disagree with that. It's not clear cut to me, but I think the only positive side, if that's even the right say, is that this was not a racist comment in my opinion. But overall, it's a very, very sad story. A young girl from India travelled to the US, has lost her life. Again, there are no winners in this. It's just a very sad story, James.
Absolutely. And I think it should be also, hindsight's always 2020. People can look at it and make calls and decisions and comments. But it should also be noted that the driver and the officer who was actually operating the motor vehicle was not subjected to criminal action or criminal penalties. Part of their policy was automatically to do a sobriety test and to ensure there was no alcohol or substances in the officer's system, which he was fine that way. There was absolutely nothing to that regard. I think it was a poor judgment racing to a call, which was reportedly an overdose. It's just
I mean, if you're a police officer, you're responding to an incident.
Yeah, but that officer should be noted that he was fined five. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, James. I was going to say the statisticians would just simply call this on a simple numbers basis. They say driving at 70 miles an hour through an urban environment, you save more lives than you lose, and that it will come down to that. That will be, I imagine, what drives the policy, whether these officers are justified in driving at these sorts of speeds through urban environments or not. Unfortunately, it's a probability game. Has this one life been lost, but in the same time, this policy has saved 20 lives? Don't know. That's up for the experts, James.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And the officer was fined $5,000. He failed to pay it. It's been sent to collections. However, he's now appealing that, and that was the driver of the police cruiser, not the other officer who happened to be on site. So we'll have to watch and see what happens. And it's just a sad situation, no matter where the student's from, whether it's a domestic student, a foreign student, doesn't matter. It's just a sad story all around. And something that driver or that police officer will have to live with the rest of his life, no matter how innocent or, accidental it was. He has to live knowing that he took the life of a young lady, which is going to play, I'm sure, on his emotions like it would for any, person with any sense of, self-respect. So with that, I think we'll just move right along there, Angus. We'll try to keep ourselves on schedule tonight.
Make a change.
What a novel idea. So the next story that I'm going to cover is actually coming from the Bloomberg Press. And I'll pull that up on the screen. We're going to take a quick peek at what is going to happen if Kamala Harris is voted in as president in the U.S. She, of course, has ties to India. Her family is from there, previous generations, and they emigrated when she was quite young before she was born, to the U.S. So with that said, the Modi government and a lot of people in India had expected a lot of favor, or to curry favor with her as vice president, which hasn't happened. She is there to represent the United States. She has done a good job at standing and making her point very clear about human rights and other issues that she had with Modi and the government there. So although her and Biden have made advances in terms of the relationship and moving it forward with India, they've also been pretty good about speaking up about the human rights abuses, about the illegal detention of not only Indian citizens, but of foreign nationals. So it hasn't worked out as well as Modi had anticipated with her being vice president. So I think it's going to be a lot of the same old when or if she takes office as the president after the next election. And it apparently, with her last visit, it seems like India has come to the realization that no, they're not going to be able to pull favors with her, given her family ties and her family's roots to India. She is still an American with the goal of standing up for the American citizens and the best interests of her nation. So that's, basically what the story covers. And I think that it is very interesting to watch and see how that plays out. But once again, it is a matter of she is doing a great job as vice president to the most points. But there are concerns, of course, with her being president. We'll have to wait and see how that works out. But at the same time, as I said, the Indian government is under no disillusion that they're going to be able to, make things happen a bit easier with her in office, because it's just not going to be the case. And also keeping in mind that with the U.S., even though the president or the vice president may have certain powers and controls and policy, they still have to get it through the Senate and, everybody else. So it's not like they just rubber stamp things for the most part. They have to go to their advisors, to their different heads of the government agencies and departments. So it's a whole shuffling game. And again, diplomacy comes in because she also has to keep balanced the interests of the U.S. versus international trade and other issues, whether it is with India, China, Russia, and so forth, especially with all of the foreign interference that's been going on. And don't get me wrong, we clearly understand that there is foreign interference in other nations that's being perpetrated by the U.S. or, I would assume Canada and other nations when it comes to being involved in trying to direct a certain political party or such in control, where there are very big interests for the US, for Canada, for the UK. So again, it's just something that we're going to watch, and I just thought it was of interest to bring that story up and just kind of fill people in where the India is looking in terms of her being elected. How do you think it's going to impact you over there in England, Angus, if she was to be brought in?
Yeah, this is... again, it's very difficult to predict which way this could go. And I think what's very interesting is reading all the comments that were received after yesterday's story when we first talked about Kamala Harris. And it's actually given us a really interesting insight into certainly our audience's opinion, which is polarised to some degree, but it's very clear to me that there is a strong leaning towards Donald Trump, certainly from a snapshot from our comments. And I think tomorrow, James, we'll do the comments show. We'll dedicate primarily to the fabulous comments that were received after yesterday's show. So do watch out for tomorrow's show. We'll talk a lot about this particular subject and your input from the audience. But yeah, I think Kamala Harris is at the moment still remains a slightly unknown and slightly unpredictable commodity. What is known, yes, obviously she has Indian heritage. So I think India clearly will see Kamala Harris as a friendly face in the White House, should she reach the White House. So certainly I think it will do no harm to Narendra Modi if she does win the race. But the question is, how strong are her ties to India? How loyal is she to her heritage? We don't know. I actually don't know if she's a practicing Hindu or if indeed she practices any faith. But clearly, at the end of the day, she will clearly have leanings towards India. So I think Narendra Modi and the BJP will, I have no doubt, be pushing for her to win this race and prefer her as the end result. But she's not Rishi Sunak. Here in the UK, we had Rishi Sunak, who was a practicing Hindu, who actually, although never said it outright, was clearly very amicable towards Narendra Modi, clearly was deliberately building a strong relationship with Narendra Modi, to the detriment, to the extent of damaging, certainly the Sikh community here in the UK, certainly was no friend to the Sikh community. That became very clear. But Kamala Harris is not that. She's not as well, certainly there's no evidence of her practicing Hinduism to the extent that Rishi Sunak did. So it may not be as strong. How will it affect the UK? I don't know. That's going to be, again, she's too much of an unknown quantity. Certainly she's not going to help the Sikh community, the Sikh diaspora. I think my gut feeling is she's going to be no friend to the Sikh diaspora. Donald Trump, on the other hand, and I think this is probably why much of our audience lean towards Donald Trump, even though he's right-wing, and again we'll discuss this in tomorrow's show, because there are some comments saying, well, he is right-wing. Yeah, he is, but let's talk about that tomorrow. But Donald Trump, I think, my gut feeling is he will be a greater friend to the Sikh community, purely because of his track record, things that he stood for in the past. And clearly, those in the community would agree with that. So it's going to be an interesting race if indeed she is finally nominated. I think, again, I'm going to make a prediction here. I think Donald Trump is just going to pip this election. Maybe wrong, of course, but my prediction is Donald Trump will win it. But we may be yet surprised. If Kamala Harris does win it, if she is nominated, she does win it, I think it could be a difficult 4 years for the Sikh diaspora across I'd say the Americas, because it's obviously what hits the US tends to have an impact on Canada and certainly on the UK. So, I think, James, we will follow this story and we will look for evidence as the months pass. We're not long, well, we're now August, September, October. We're only 3 or 4 months away from the election. So there's a very short window to get a genuine flavour of what's going to happen in terms of what she stands for and how she will impact certainly our audience, James.
Well, and it could be very interesting to watch as well, because it's unprecedented in that you have someone with that connection to India not only running as president, but if you go to the other side, with Trump's VP being named, it is Mr. Vance. And his wife is also of Indian background. She is a practicing Hindu. He is a Christian. I believe he was evangelical and he switched, or vice versa. But regardless, it is an interracial marriage. They respect each other's religions. And with her being a practicing Hindu, I'm wondering if that might actually be a huge benefit to the Sikh, the Muslims, and the Christians and other minorities within India, because she has a very powerful voice in her husband's ear. She's really connected with him. He listens to her advice. They're a great team that way. So I can see her trying to push for more respect for other religions, given that it's right there so close to home, literally in the home. So that could be a very powerful advantage as well when it comes to moving forward the respect for religious rights and personal and human rights within India. So I think that might be something very interesting to watch as well. And in one of the upcoming shows, I'll definitely cover in more detail Mrs. Vance's background. Very smart lady.
Yeah, that
very smart family, well educated, and
I think that injects quite a very interesting dynamic into the whole story, doesn't it? We have the VP's wife.
Oh, it certainly does.
A Hindu. But one wonders if there was some clever reasoning behind that in appointing Vance as VP, because of course that then brings the Indian diaspora potentially on board on the Republican side. Who knows? We're not the strategists. We're just the interpreters. So, but we'll see. But yeah, James, I think that
right.
does create quite an interesting situation. I think if you take a step back and if you ask me, who do I think of the two between Harris and Trump, who would push for human rights in India at the cost of a trade deal? I have absolutely no doubt that Trump would be the one who would put human rights above a trade deal. I don't think Harris is strong enough to do that. I'm not sure her heart would be in it. I think she would be more, let's say, diplomatic, but also perhaps more aligned to the Modi way of doing things than Trump would be. So, yeah, interesting dynamics, James.
that it is. It adds a whole new level of entertainment to the election south of the border.
Doesn't it, Jess? Well, all I can guarantee is, all touch wood, we will be hopefully following this as best we can, and we'll keep our audience informed, certainly with our perceptions and our perspectives on that story, which I have no doubt will rumble on for the next 4 months until we're all totally sick of the entire subject. Okay, let's move on. And my first story. Okay, and again, we're going to go to the US for this one again. This is a story that actually a UK newspaper picked up, but it actually reflects a bit of an ongoing story that is reflected actually not just in the US. And I picked this story primarily because although the focus is on the US border with Mexico, this story is played out across many borders in Europe as well. And it's interesting the parallels we're seeing this. Basically, the premise of this story is that migrants who are trying to cross borders illegally and even legally They're meeting the border forces and they are being stripped of their personal possessions. And of course, when this comes to Sikhs trying to cross these borders, these Sikhs are finding that their turbans, their dastars, are being removed forcibly, which of course is a deeply offensive thing to do to any Sikh. So this story here, I'll just quickly whip through the details here. It's a story of human tragedy in many ways. And it goes on that birth certificates, baby formula, diapers and last set of clothes. These are some of the items that border patrols are throwing away as it processes unauthorised migrants who they then return to Mexico. And it gives an example of a woman who fled to the US from Mexico City with her husband and 2 children, trying to escape violent threats towards her family, told Arizona public media that the Border Patrol threw away her cell phone, her diapers, wet wipes for children. A reporter observed her breastfeeding, wearing a hospital-style paper shirt because officials had reportedly thrown away her clothes. So pretty ruthless stuff going on. But most importantly here, of course, relevant to us, data compiled suggests border officials routinely throw away life-saving medicines, with a fifth of respondents with HIV saying their medicines have been tossed away last year. But also the Border Patrol has been accused of seizing and destroying turbans belonging to Sikhs crossing the border. And the comment was, the seizure and destruction of turbans, an article of faith that's deeply meaningful and personal to Sikh individuals, is just one example of the egregious practices of border control with regard to migrants' personal property. And that was a quote from Sahel Kaur, who's a staff attorney for the Sikh Coalition. So yeah, now this story, and we've seen this here in Europe as well, and even on through airplanes, Sikhs coming in via aircraft who've gone through border patrol have been searched and strip searched, and their turbans have been forcibly removed. And the terrible, sad story here, apart from obviously the human tragedy side of this, is that a lot of these border patrols, and again, I'm going to spring to the defence here, that it is unforgivable in many ways. It is a deeply sacrilegious thing to do to a Sikh. But at the same time, this is all about education. And it's very clear that a lot of these border guards, with all due respect to them, quite a lot of them are not very highly educated in the ways of the world. They're very good at doing their job. What they don't understand, and clearly what they are struggling with, is this respect towards many religions and many things that people wear, not just as Sikhs, but other religions. They wear items of clothing or items of accoutrements that are very important to their religious beliefs. And of course, a clumsy border guard has one simple job. He's going to strip a migrant because he's checking for weapons, he's checking for drugs, he's checking for whatever they're looking for. And of course, they almost don't care about these things. They just need to do their job. So of course, these Sikhs who are crossing the borders are finding that their turbans are removed. It is deeply offensive. But these guys are just doing the jobs. Now, again, back to almost that first story. This doesn't justify it, it just explains it. And unfortunately, this is happening across many borders. And I think the root story of all this, it's all about education. We need to get the message out. And I think the community has been doing a great job to some degree. But clearly, there is a lot of work to do about education about the Sikh religion. The turban, amongst other things, the 5Ks, are deeply important, are deeply significant parts of their faith, and they must be respected as such. But unfortunately, when it comes up against the brute force, the ruthlessness of law enforcement, they are clearly not aware of these. So it's all about education, James. Many people don't understand the Sikh religion. They see people, I remember it from my own youth, seeing Sikhs walking around my home cities and looking at them thinking, yeah, they do look different because they wear these turbans. And yeah, it's all about understanding and education. What does it mean to wear a turban? Yeah, it's all about education, James, isn't it?
Oh, it's beyond that. Yeah, it's just getting the information out there. And not only that, but for the border guards to just really be reminded that no matter whether or not you're a citizen, a migrant, or anybody else on U.S. soil, you are protected by the constitutional rights that are afforded to everyone, not just citizens, but everyone on American soil. And this definitely falls back to breaching those. So as you said, I think it's a incredible learning opportunity for the Border Patrol, for Homeland Security, and for individuals to understand that, because it's just unheard of that they would degrade people to that level.
Yeah, and this follows that theme of our first story today. What is the value of human life? And of course, all these migrants, many of them are desperate. They're in terrible circumstances. They're only crossing this. There are exceptions to this, but a large part of these migrants are fleeing something horrible. They're fleeing lives that were just that awful that they've had to pick up their children and run. So their story is a story of human tragedy. They're at the end of their tethers, and they're meeting this blunt instrument of border forces who are stripping away their only possessions, literally what they're carrying on their backs, and sometimes their medicines, as this story highlights. So, what is the value of a human life? And clearly these human lives are not being valued enough in many of these situations. But yeah, a sad story. But let's move on to my next story, and let's get political once again. And we're going to take a look at India. Now, we have seen reports on social media. Now, this hasn't been verified, but it does look like it may well be true. This is a story coming out of India. And this memorandum that I'm showing up on the screen here, this is a memo apparently issued in India to all civil servants and all members of the Lok Sabha. And this has been highlighted by a gentleman on Twitter, X, called Asaduddin Owaisi, who's a member of the Lok Sabha. And he's made the comment, this office memo purportedly shows that the government has lifted the ban on government employees and civil servants participating in RSS activities. If true, this is against India's integrity and unity. The ban on the RSS exists because it had originally refused to accept the constitution, the national flag and the national anthem. Every RSS member takes an oath that puts Hindutva above the nation. No civil servant can be loyal to the nation if he is a member of the RSS. So basically, if this is true, this memo is saying that you can be a member of the Lok Sabha, you can be a member of the civil service, and also be a member of the RSS. Now, of course, as he points out in this statement here, if you're a member of the RSS, you're essentially swearing allegiance to the RSS first and all their values of Hindutva before the flag of India, before your own nation. And this sets up a very dangerous situation. Now, the RSS was banned for a very good reason. And that ban has stood in place for a long time. I won't say it's been particularly successful because it's very clear that several members of the Lok Sabha are publicly known members of the RSS. And of course, this statement, and if true, if this memo is true, it's caused a bit of a storm across social media and of course in the public. And I'll just read some of the comments that have been made after this. One chap says, if it's true, this is going to be the end of democracy and constitutional values in India. And it's interesting, this talk about the constitution, because there is this claim that the RSS do not respect the constitution. They don't agree with the constitution, which to me, as an independent observer, thinks, well, does anybody in India respect the constitution? What is the point of the constitution? Because certainly the Sikh community do not have any truck at all with the Indian constitution. They refuse to sign it because it did not represent them and their values and their community. And here we have confirmation that the RSS certainly have no respect for the constitution. We know that almost as a fact, because certainly we've seen the RSS and the BJP, how they've treated the constitution, certainly over J&K and certain other areas, where they've just basically ignored the constitution or essentially had the Supreme Court rewrite the constitution to suit their own values and policies. So certainly the RSS has no respect for the Indian constitution. So one does ask, who are the mugs who are actually believing in the Indian constitution? But anyway, that's off on a tangent. So the next comment, every RSS member takes an oath to put Hindutva above the nation. No civil servant can be loyal to the nation. Absolutely, by process of logic, if you're an RSS member, you believe in Hindutva values before you believe in the nation of India. And then another lengthy comment, and again I'll quickly paraphrase this one. Previously, government officials used to support the RSS but were not vocal about it. They kept quiet about it. But this move will now cause them to openly support the RSS and instigate the hate ideology at a much higher level. Yeah, basically this means that they can now proudly be supporters of the RSS. And of course this means that essentially it endorses them, it allows them to push this ideology, this extremist ideology, into policy making. We know it's been going on at a very hidden level, but now they can openly do it because they're now allowed to be members of the RSS. And it says the limit of the ban to government officials was not enough. It should have been extended to public servants as well, of course. And how could they be affiliated to an organisation that has openly refused to accept the Constitution? Once again, it's openly refused to accept the national flag and the national anthem. They're not Indians. You can almost argue here they're not Indians. They are RSS. They are Hindutva. Clearly, there is a division here. And we do know they are pushing for this Hindu Rashtra. Is that Hindu Rashtra India? It's very interesting interpreting the comments here, because basically, just by simple implication and logic, the Hindu Rashtra is itself not India. Certainly not India as we know it. It is something else. It is this, and again, I'd refer back to several of our podcasts where we've discussed this Hindu Rashtra, this whole ideology of Akhand Bharat, this territorial boundary that follows the old British Empire, that includes Myanmar in the east. It goes as far as Afghanistan in the west. It goes down to Sri Lanka in the south. It's this huge territorial ambition that is Akhand Bharat, that is the aspiration of the RSS. So no, it doesn't follow India as we know it today. It certainly does not follow the Constitution as we know it today.
Right.
And then finally, this comment: when we were struggling for freedom from colonial rule, we were united. Not sure I totally agree with that, but anyway. For 7 decades, India has been held together by its constitution, questionable again, which promises equality to all. But Narendra Modi's BJP is remaking the nation into one where some people count as more Indian than others. And absolutely, I would agree with that point there. Very true. That Narendra Modi is responsible for creating this multi-tiered society. It's always been there, the caste system. But he is certainly cementing that into modern day India. He is cementing this multi-tiered society where certainly the lower caste are seen as exactly that, and certainly the minorities are being seen as second class or even third class citizens. So a very interesting set of comments, and I could go on for hours reading a lot of these comments, which bring out some very interesting interpretations of this situation. But if this is true, and we're always a little bit careful with stories like this that appear on social media, we don't know for sure. But if this is true, frankly, I'm not surprised. And more importantly, if it is true, it sets India once again into that path towards totalitarianism, driven by this hate ideology of the extremist RSS nationalists. They are dangerous. These people are driving India into very dangerous territory. They are driving India away from democracy. They are driving it into another China, into another Russia. And if the people of India want that, you need to wake up. If you want to stop it, you need to wake up quickly, because this is the way it's going. Little incremental steps. This is how it's happened. We've talked about this a lot in the past, James. We've warned in the past. This is how you get to a totalitarian regime. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens by small incremental steps. This, if true, is yet another big step towards that situation. India better wake up soon, shouldn't it?
Absolutely, and it's like you say, it happens in small steps, and every time that they're given that step and allowed to proceed with that step, the steps slowly get larger and larger until there are no steps left, because they've gotten everything that they were going for, and nobody has pushed back and resisted them. So it's a dangerous position to be in if people aren't standing up to make sure they're paying attention and stopping this sort of action. It's scary.
Yeah, indeed it is. But we'll follow that story, and if we do get any confirmation of that, we will of course let you know. If of course it turns out to be fake news again, we will likewise report on that. Okay, finally, a quick update on Amritpal.
We will definitely keep our eyes open.
Indeed, absolutely. That's what we're here for. So my final story, Amritpal Singh, a quick update. We've seen a bit of news leaking out of the Punjab and Chandigarh jail over in Assam. Apparently, Amritpal Singh's legal team have launched an appeal, and this is one of several appeals that have been launched. But, of course, we do know Amritpal Singh resides, sadly, in Dibrugarh jail over in Assam indefinitely under this dreadful National Security Act legislation. He still has not faced trial. He still has not faced charges as yet, formal charges, but he's been there for over a year. Now, we do know in April that his 1-year detention was extended. Under the NSA, the authorities are allowed to keep him for 12 months at a time. After 12 months, after the anniversary, it can then only be extended for 3 months at a time. Now, that 3 months is due up, I think it's this week. So as a result of that, his legal team, and I'll just quickly rush through this statement I've had from the Punjab, is that despite being elected as an MP, the Punjab government is in understanding with the Indian government that his detention was extended under the NSA by 1 more year. That is not true. It's 3 months that happened in April. But he was not allowed to take his oath as an MP as per the normal rules, as we do know, that he was in fact brought to the Parliament for his oath-taking like a, quote, hardcore criminal or dreaded terrorist. We do know that, we reported on that he was given this 4-day bail, a deeply conditional bail, to take his oath, but that bail, the condition was that he was only allowed to travel to the Lok Sabha to take his oath. He was not allowed to make a speech. He was not allowed to talk to anybody. And then he was immediately returned under armed guard back to Dibrugarh jail. So again, treated like the worst sort of criminal, which in itself is shocking. This is an elected member of the Lok Sabha. This is somebody who was elected by a vast, overwhelming majority in his constituency to represent that constituency in a democratic process. And now he's kept in chains and he is not allowed even to make a speech. His oath-taking speech, like every other single member of the Lok Sabha, is by right allowed to do so. So again, special treatment. So his legal counsel, advocate Rajwinder Singh Bains, made the following statement that they have appealed and he has said to the High Court, there are no grounds to keep him behind bars under the NSA. There is no evidence against him, which is required for this kind of detention. Secondly, he has been elected by the people now. How can you say that he is a danger to society? So he's making the very legal statement, the very legal case that he is not a danger to society, as is normally the test of reasonableness for any criminal offence. He is no danger to society. If he was, why would he be elected by the overwhelming majority of his constituency? So his illegal detention is being termed as a grave violation of human rights by the Indian state. 2 days ago, that's 3 days ago now, he wrote to the Speaker of the Lok Sabha, the lower house of Parliament, seeking permission to attend the upcoming monsoon session of the Parliament. So, of course, he's now asked, as is his right as an elected member of the Lok Sabha, to be allowed to attend, as is his duty, not just his right, his duty, to attend the next session of the Parliament. However, no permission has been granted to Amritpal Singh, and it says here, who launched his drive against drugs in the Punjab and initiated the movement to preach the religious values, especially among youth. And that highlights there, of course, the great work that Amritpal Singh was doing to drive out this evil of the drugs, very deliberately being poured into the Punjab that we have reported on regularly. So, again, it's just a small update, but we'll keep these updates coming, reporting on how his progress is going. We will see. This week, I believe that his detention is up for renewal. I think it's pretty predictable what the Indian government are going to do. It is a travesty of justice. He still has not been charged. He still has not faced any trial. He has still not been able, like Jaggi Singh Johal, he's not been allowed any due process of law to prove his innocence. He hasn't been charged. No charges have been brought in a court of law against him. This is the evil of this legislation, the National Security Act and the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. These two pieces of legislation, amongst many others, that are being used against political prisoners in the Indian state. These guys are now sitting behind bars, they're rotting behind bars, waiting for any form of legal process in this so-called democratic nation of India. To me, I rant about it every time, but it appalls me from sitting in a democratic country, a genuinely democratic country, and it appalls me that India, a nation that calls itself a democracy, that calls itself a believer in the rule of law, has this appalling example of injustice sitting there day after day. Nothing's being done about it. Narendra Modi sits there watching this, laughing at this. I'm sorry, Mr. Modi, you do not sit on a country that follows the rule of law, that any normal democratic rule of law. Again, I will rant about this, and every time this story comes up, I will rant about it because I want to see India succeed. I want to see India follow the rule of law, but you can only do that by following the letter of normal democratic law. And this, Amritpal Singh, Jagtal Singh Johal, and many, many others who are simple political prisoners are sitting there rotting in jail. If they're criminals, charge them. Put them through the process of law. If they're guilty, fine. But unfortunately, we do not see any process of law. James, I do get aerated about this every time we talk about it, but it makes me so angry.
And that's something that we've discussed many a times on the show in the past, is the lack of respect for the law and the Constitution, but mostly the law, not only within India, but the lack of respect of the law of other nations when they feel they can go in and assassinate foreign citizens on foreign soil. It shows a lack of respect for laws around the globe, not just there in India. So it's not something that we haven't discussed before, and unfortunately I think it's something that we're going to be talking about in the future. And again, something that we spoke about last night with the increased powers of the soldiers and the special operatives being released into Jammu and Kashmir and other regions where they don't even have the responsibility and the checks and balances. They're just given carte blanche to go in there, and if they suspect something, they can open fire or arrest people and hold them. So it's, you know, it's just a lawless nation at this point that they have to start giving respect to the law that they already have, let alone to make adjustments.
Yeah, and I've used this term in the past, banana republic. I mean, I have to say, locking up your political prisoners and wading into parts of your own country with your armed forces under this thin veneer of so-called legality or law, it's banana republic stuff. This isn't a normal... I mean, you certainly wouldn't see anything like this happening in the UK or Canada or Australia or the US or any Western European nation. You just wouldn't see this sort of behaviour. This is not the behaviour of a democracy. This is not the behaviour of a country that follows the rule of law. Certainly not any law that any Western democracy recognises. And the irony, of course, is that Indian law is essentially British colonial law that has been evolved since. But unfortunately, it's evolved into something that is just a monster. It's a totalitarian monster now. So anyway, yes, we have talked about that a lot, and no doubt we will continue to talk about it. So yeah, let's move on as we are, as always, under time pressure. So, of course, our next section, which is always very popularly received, is our comments section. And we have received an awful lot of comments. Thank you so much, everybody. Clearly, once again, comments are disappearing. I have noticed a lot of the comments over the last few days where people have said, I have commented, and those comments have disappeared. Thank you very much for making us aware of that. But do keep those comments coming in. As always, they are appreciated. As I said earlier, we will do, I think tomorrow we'll definitely focus on the Kamala Harris, Donald Trump situation. We've had an awful lot of interesting, fascinating, hilarious comments on that one. Lots of interesting debates and arguments about it as well, as of course would be expected under such a topic. But anyway, let us look at what we've had over the last few days. Now, we reported our story about the Globe and Mail and their anti-Sikh stories that they've been publishing over many years. And we received a lot of comments about this. S. Baines said, "What's wrong with the Globe and Mail? It's such lazy reporting and full of Indian and right-wing nonsense." And then this following comment from user TT something or other. "I think it's about time that Sikhs started to sue the authors and publishers of these articles in the US, the UK and Canadian courts for damages and for collaborating with the Indian government." And then this final one from Amrik says, "We see Indian narrative regarding Sikhs in British media all the time in the UK as well." Now, all these basically follow a very common theme. Yeah, absolutely. It is very clear that Hindutva and the Hindutva forces are using, as James has reported in the past, James, you reported, their interference in the West, in particularly the Western politics and Western media. And it's very clear that they are interfering in media outlets. They're paying people, they're influencing people to write these terribly misinformed articles, these terrible propaganda pieces with a very clear agenda. They want to damage the Sikh community. And a lot of these articles are written specifically for that. And I think the first comment is lazy reporting. Sometimes it is, but more often than not, it's deliberate reporting. It follows a very deliberate agenda. Can we sue? Probably not, because they're very clever how they write these things. They write these articles probably with the oversight of a lawyer to make sure that they do not defame anybody, that they cannot be sued. They just push it so far, knowing that they can say these sorts of things, that they can make these narratives, but you can't sue really against a narrative unless it's really unless it defames somebody. Unfortunately, there is no comeback, and they know this. And the final comment, we see it in the British media, absolutely we do, this Indian narrative, and it was worse obviously under Rishi Sunak, but very clearly the Indian government, the Indian establishment is very close to the British establishment, and they do push this narrative that we've seen here in the UK. So James, yeah, it's the same in Canada with Globe and Mail. It's very hard to combat this. Once an agenda is there in place and once a narrative is written about, like in the Globe and Mail, it's very hard to change it, isn't it?
It is, and again, that's what we touched on in terms of the foreign interference and what qualifies as interference, what doesn't, what's the gray areas. And tomorrow when we do that episode, I'll bring up the actual episode number, the date, so you can reference it if you want to go back and look. There's actually a great graphic that describes exactly this about foreign governments paying Canadian producers of whether it's news magazines, newspapers, and so forth, all different content, how they can pay them to push a certain narrative as opposed to it actually being journalistic approaches.
Yeah, and this is the power of misinformation and disinformation. It's very hard to deal with. It's very hard to fight because it's just subtle enough. It's very clever enough to sway, to influence an agenda. But it's very hard to stop it. The only way you can stop it is with an equal and opposite force. It's simple. The laws of physics, unfortunately, apply to misinformation. You have to apply an equal and opposite force to counteract it. That's the only way you can counteract this, unfortunately. This was our podcast that we did last week with Bhajan Singh Binder. It was a fascinating interview. Please do watch this interview. It brought out a huge amount of interesting facts and evidence about how India, the Indian government, has been using for a long time the Afghan, not necessarily the government, but certainly the Taliban forces and the Islamic extremist forces, the groups of which, of course, are very splintered. But particularly it refers to ISIS, the ISKP, these splinter groups who are the real extremists in operating out of Afghanistan. And it's how the Indian state, the Indian government have been essentially using them as proxies to kill Sikhs and Islamic militants and Islamic activists in Pakistan and indeed in India. And of course in J&K as well. So it's a fascinating tale. A lot of evidence came out in this interview. It does refer to the interesting interview with Sarah Adams, the CIA analyst, who actually confirmed a lot of this information. And so our first comment after this, there were many comments, but Groal Sukhwinder stated, "I believe the Indian state has nothing to offer to its people, and it constructs these fake plans to make fools of their own people." And this is interesting. Interestingly, RSS is not registered and has no records of its members to identify their heinous crimes against humanity. I didn't actually know this, and thank you for this comment. This has educated me. I didn't realise. I assumed the RSS had all sorts of lists of memberships, but you're claiming here they don't. And of course, it would make sense that they don't, because if they are up to all sorts of no good, James, then why would you keep records of who is a member of your own party? It's common sense, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and we've seen that in the past where historically, atrocities and crimes have been committed and, trying to get to the bottom of who were members of what organizations. Of course they don't want to keep the records, as you said. Why would you if you're acting in an illegal manner, right?
Yeah. And an interesting first part of that comment, it essentially differentiates between, well, let's call it the RSS and the people of India. And again, this does highlight this division between these extremists and these they see themselves almost as a superior race. It does follow this Hindutva ideology. Hardayal, I think, had these 4 pillars of Hindutva, which I've certainly read about, and these are these extremist, these 4 pillars that promote this almost Aryan superiority of the RSS, this race, this Hindu race. And that does differentiate from ordinary Indian people who are not part of this superior race. And as you say here, yeah, they're playing their own people at this game. And this is why when I say to our critics, wake up to what's going on in your own country. You are a simple pawn being manipulated. And this actually is an interesting segue, an interesting follow-on to the following comment from Sukhdev Singh, who says, no, I don't buy your false narrative. He doesn't believe this. Certainly these claims that were made in this podcast, but also, and I would add, these claims have been backed up by this CIA analyst in this recent interview, Sarah Adams, fascinating interview, who basically confirmed what's going on, that essentially India is funding these elements of ISIS to kill Sikhs and Muslims. And this person says he doesn't believe it, and followed up by this hilarious comment, S. Baines, laugh out loud, spoken like a true Indian, and closing your eyes to the facts. Actually, again, I couldn't say this better, that unfortunately, yeah, you believe it's a false narrative because you have been fed this whole agenda by these RSS people, these extremists, who are feeding you this narrative that you've completely bought into because you watch your Indian news, you watch the Indian media that only gives you this completely created, this fabricated truth of what is actually going on in India. And unfortunately, you believe every word that you are told. And this is why we exist. And James and I are trying to explain to you what you're watching in India is so far from the truth. It is the most twisted version of events. And these things are actually going on because the proof is out there. The evidence pours out from every side. It pours out from whether it's the CIA reporting it, as they've reported it, as we've reported it. All sorts of news, independent news outlets are reporting it. So unfortunately, don't buy a false narrative. That is your right. But please at least listen to what we have to say. Watch what we show you. Form your own opinions based on a balanced narrative. That's all we ask, James, isn't it?
It certainly is. We just want to give you some guiding pathways for you to learn and take all of the information and facts yourself and make your own informed decisions. But that's just it. Make it an informed opinion.
Yeah, but thank you for that comment nonetheless. I mean, it was politely put, and we very much appreciate your comment. And I'm sorry to sort of rant at you, but it really is it's almost out of frustration. Please do open your mind and look at these things and see if there even could be an element of truth in it. But I'll tell you, for a fact, every government lies. It's just a fact of life. Unfortunately, the Indian government more so than most.
To what degree?
Okay. So we'll come on to our final set of comments, and I have deliberately restricted this to only a few because, as I say, we'll devote probably the whole comment section tomorrow to our show about Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. We were inundated with lots and lots of fabulous comments. Thank you so much for so many interesting and varied opinions and inputs. All of you had so much to contribute to this story. And I've just taken a very small section today because, again, we could have a whole show dedicated to your wonderful comments on this. But one comment, Guvi Yul,
thank you to all the
said,
viewers for sharing it because we actually hit record numbers on our viewers yesterday. So that's great.
Yeah, a great show. It was a great show, or I should say a great response to our show. So thank you for that. But this first comment, certainly one of the earlier comments, which opened up a very interesting debate. I am a pro-India Sikh, but even I'm concerned of how some Indian agencies are targeting Sikhs. I would also warn against cozying up to the Pakistani Muslims that are not our friends. Now, this opens up a lot of big issues here that we don't have time to dig into deeply. But this was followed by a lot of comments. Manveer Singh said, "You're a pro-Indian Sikh? Interesting position, bro. Also, maybe Sikh activists believe for strategic purposes to keep good relations with your enemy's enemy." Now, I'll go back to the first comment. He's a pro-Indian Sikh, but even he's concerned about how some Indian agencies are targeting Sikhs. So basically, this is a very opposite view to many of our viewers. Many of our viewers are very, I would say, anti-Indian. and they see themselves as separate from India. But here is one person who claims he is a Sikh, but he's pro-India. He is clearly pro the unification of India to include the Punjab. Absolutely, as is your democratic right, and we would never criticise that right. You have every right to make that statement and to believe in that, and we respect that. So absolutely, and I would say well done to you for standing up for what you believe in. But of course, Manvir's come back and said, come on, mate, are you sure about this? But anyway, he refers to the other comment, which is, I would also warn against cozying up to the Pakistan Muslims. Now, this is where things get interesting, because this reflects a very right-wing attitude, and this reflects a lot of the RSS stance. The RSS and the extreme right wing in India, the Hindus, are very anti-Muslim. And I wonder, this alerts my suspicious senses, I wonder, are you a Hindutva activist? Because you're displaying a slightly right-wing view here, where you're saying, watch out for those Muslims, those dangerous Muslims. And that's a view reflected very much in the right wing. So I wonder, is this a Hindutva plant? I don't know, and I don't mean that as any disrespect if indeed you are genuinely a Sikh living in the Punjab. So my apologies if that is not the case. But it follows up with, there are no such thing as pro-India Sikhs. If anyone tells us they're a Sikh, but they're pro-India, they are complicit. You are complicit in the genocide. Very powerful comment. If you believe in this united India, if you're pro-India, then you supported what India did in 1984. The terrible genocides. Powerful point, well made. Followed up by, Muslims in the Punjab and Pakistan are not our enemies. They are the same, but they follow a different religion. They have the same surnames, Gill, Chima, Bajwa, etc. So again, a very powerful follow-up comment that the Muslims, particularly in the Pakistan side of Punjab, they are not our enemies. They are essentially our brothers. They might follow a different religion, but they originally were part of the original Sikh Empire, their ancestors. So an interesting debate here. It opens up a lot of big issues, James, that we could talk about for a very long time. But it does clearly show this polarisation of position, where on one side, one guy's saying, and this, I believe this does reflect some people, I've seen comments in other forums, that there are Sikhs in the Punjab who are still wedded, who love India as a nation. They love the Indian flag and they don't want to be a separate nation from India. And I have absolutely 100% respect for that right. If you believe in that, that is absolutely your right. But on the other side, we've got, in my opinion, the majority of Sikhs who are very much pro-Khalistan, very much not believers in India as it stands. They're not enemies of India. I think a lot of them are not enemies of India. They respect India to be a separate nation, but they want their right to self-determination. Lots of sensitive issues here. Yeah, James, this is a very hot topic. We could get ourselves into all sorts of trouble by saying the wrong thing here.
Absolutely, but it's really nice to see that they're utilizing this platform to have those discussions and those debates. And, again, it's everyone's right to have their opinion and to share it. And it's really nice to see that people are not afraid to do so. And we respect everybody's opinions. We don't have to agree with them, but we do respect them. So.
Yes, and I would say thank you for keeping things polite, everybody, and funny at times. We've had a laugh over many comments. There's been some very robust views put forward, but in a very friendly and intelligent way. So keep it that way, and we'll certainly be very happy to cover those. But I believe that has drawn us to a close. We are there at the end. Unfortunately, once again, time has beaten us. But I must say thank you once again to every member of our audience who has not just watched us but has also commented on our videos. Please keep those comments coming in. Of course, some comments are clearly disappearing, as many of you have stated. So I would remind you that you can contact us directly at message@sutlejtv.com if you would like anything specific to send us. If you make comments, it's not appearing and you are deeply frustrated about it, send it to me or James personally on our message@sutlejtv.com email address. We will read it and we'll respond to it, and certainly if it's worth talking about, we will highlight it in our comment section as well. So do keep those comments coming in. Thank you so much for each and every one of you watching the show. Do keep us informed of any news stories that you would like us to highlight that we might have missed. We do like receiving those as well. But in the meantime, we must draw things to a close. It is a goodbye from me, and it is a goodbye from James.
Bye everyone, stay safe.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.